This is the Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. Episode 157, recorded May 24th, 2018. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So, today, as usual, we are going to be talking about Lost in Space, Legion, and Westworld, with only the slight wrinkle that we are going to be covering 2 episodes of Lost in Space this week, 3 next week, just so we can get through Lost in Space before Will goes on a trip where he's going to be gone for 2 weeks. So we're just trying to kind of manage our schedule so that we can keep things fresh, so that we don't get to the point where Will comes back and we're like, I made the joke last time, we have like 67 episodes we're discussing. So we're finding different ways to get through as much of the stuff we have here as possible in the best way possible. And that means, first and foremost, getting through Lost in Space before he leaves. So that's where we're going to start on Lost in Space. We're talking about Season 1, Episode 6 and Season 1, Episode 7, titled Eulogy and Pressurized, respectively. That's not one title. So, you said before we started recording the show that Lost in Space has become a bit of a turkey for you.
Yeah, it's just not that interesting.
I feel mostly the same way. I think there's so many aggravating character decisions. Characters are making decisions that are so aggravating because they're so stupid, and they're creating more drama than there needs to be.
Right.
And that's always an annoying thing on TV. That's something that I was hoping we'd be getting away from as we're getting to more and more peak TV, and it's more competitive, that we get less conflict from stupidity.
Yeah, conflict from stupid. It just seems like all the characters' decisions, everything is just engineered to create conflict. I was thinking about this last night after I had watched both episodes of Lost in Space, and I was thinking, this show really, good shows, good TV, the conflict comes from the characters themselves. Mm-hmm. And in Lost in Space, it's the characters just create conflict. It's not organic. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you take something like Game of Thrones, the conflict is because of who the characters are, what their positions are, their personalities. A lot of the conflict simply comes from all those things organically, you know?
Yeah, it's you take a character of this type and you take a character of that type and you put them in a situation of this type, what happens?
Exactly.
And that's what Game of Thrones is like. Except with Game of Thrones, it's not one character versus another character. It's thousands of characters all clashing.
Because
they happen to be being forced together in situations that create conflict. Right. Whereas in Lost in Space, they could do something like that because they have a lot of characters right now. Right. But instead, they're kind of focusing in on just the family, and they're not even doing a lot of family drama, typical family drama stuff, and how that would affect the thing, which would be more interesting than what they are doing. What they're doing is more manufacturing.
Yeah, they're manufacturing drama because you realize with the setup, there would not be conflict if people just acted rationally. The ironic part is these are supposed to be super smart people, best of the best. Yeah. That's how they got where they are, right? They're the best of the best.
The most egregious of all that I think right now is Dr. Smith.
Yes.
Dr. Smith has this plan, and it is the most stupid, freewheeling, nonsensical plan I've ever seen, and somehow it's all working out for what
somehow it's working
the dumbest way possible.
Because everybody around her is so stupid, even though they're supposed to be smartest people on the planet.
I mean, it would be her plan would be me saying, I'm going to become the King of England, and the way I'm going to achieve that is by killing the president of Chile.
Yeah.
What? What? That doesn't even make sense. And it's and then the ripple effects from there, and the political, eventually I'll be King of England. And it's what? That doesn't make any sense. And then, then she'll do something, and it ends up working in her favor, not because it makes any sense and because stuff happens logically, but because stuff happens illogically, and it just so happens to fall exactly where she wanted it to.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff random chance. For instance, the woman that they found unconscious, right? I was interested in that because I thought, there'd be a character there. There would, I legitimately thought there'd be something interesting there. She'd have, some kind of interesting backstory. You get to learn more about her, as things went on. No, she was just a plot device to facilitate Dr. Smith carrying out what her ridiculous plan. That's all that was. Like,
yeah.
Literally, she has trauma because the robot killed her husband when it attacked the Resolute, and Dr. Smith was able to use that trauma to force her to attack the robot and make the robot knock out Will's dad. This is all random chance shit. Like, how can you plan? How can you plan?
Yeah, because her plan wasn't to have this woman just shoot at the robot. It was to have the woman shoot at the robot, have it cause some other problem, some other disaster, which would in turn cause Will himself to turn on the robot. That was her plan. Like, all of that had to occur. And without any insight to the idea that, like, well, what if Will was killed? You know, yeah. What if, like, you know, enough people were killed that, like, it just made the plan not work? What if the woman didn't go through with it? It's like, no chance for any of that.
It worked perfectly. And then I realized, this isn't a character they brought in to enrich. This was a character brought in to facilitate the plot this part of the plot they had in mind. Like, and I'm just like, oh, yeah.
I had to laugh when she was putting the robot together after Will had the robot jump off the cliff, and she was putting the robot back together, but she couldn't get it to work. And it was like, oh, what do you need from me? What do you need? And like the first thing that came to my mind, laughingly, like I was joking, was, you're missing the innocent joy of a young child. That was the secret ingredient.
That's what I'm saying. Like she had to destroy the robot. She was gonna put the robot together, but she didn't freaking know. Like, if she had no way of knowing if it could even be put together after being destroyed so thoroughly. Like, again, like, how is that a plan?
She wouldn't know how Will would kill the robot. Come to think of it, how did she know where to fucking find the robot?
She knew exactly where he told it.
Because they didn't show anything to show that she was even remotely anywhere. In fact, she was plotting other machinations while Will and his dad were making that grave site, which is where he ended up having the robot kill himself. Like, she was doing other machinations in that time, so she didn't even follow them there, you know? Like, so I guess you could say she followed Will and the robot when they went to kill, but they didn't really imply that. They were showing her, like, watching the one woman that shot at the robot and, like, taking care of her, so that didn't make sense either. So it's like, well, then how did, it's just so convenient and stupid and
yeah.
I liked the first episode of this series. Then it started going a little downhill, but I was like, oh, but it's got room to kind of fix itself. And then now it's not good.
No, it's not. It's really not good.
The sad thing is there are moments where it's like, okay, this is kind of cool. And then, like, it just goes to shit again.
The writing is just too flimsy. I mean, this just goes to show that you can throw money at something. You can throw HBO-sized budgets at a show. You can hire a cast of great actors. And I think the acting is fantastic. You know, like, I think it's got good actors. I think it's obviously very high budget, but, you know, if the writing's not there, it's not there. You can't sit with other things.
The sad thing is there are some interesting concepts. The idea that this planet has, like, a ridiculously short life. That, like, the sun gets closer and closer, it destroys everything, and then it starts getting further and further away.
Even that, they just turned into a plot point to create, like, drama, you know, like, just like
overly convenient, like, oh, it happens to be having, like, this like geothermal reaction that's going to be threatening to them all the way until they escape it and hit a tree, and then it stops.
Yeah.
It's the geothermic reaction is a creature that's attacking them, and not just like a natural disaster.
Yeah, not just like a natural disaster. It's just like the stuff about the plant dying is interesting, but that's just like another plot point to create drama because the Robinsons decide to keep it a secret, and then the daughter Penny overhears it.
Just the dumbest thing ever. Because it's like they want to do it because they say, like, they have the explainer where she talks to the other scientist, and when she finally tells him, which she should have told him immediately as a fellow scientist.
Yeah, she should.
You know, so, like, even if she was having doubts about being able to share it with everyone, she should have come clean to, like, people that she knows are more level-headed immediately. But she didn't, and it's just so ridiculous because it's like so many things would have panned out differently had that been the case.
Yeah, so
you know, exactly. Like, there's no way that anybody would have let the fuel go to waste like it did if they knew that everybody was on, like, such a short short shelf life.
Yeah, but if they don't keep it a secret, then it doesn't create unnecessary drama that,
And that's the problem, because it wasn't needed.
It's stupid because they have Penny overhearing it, and she just blurts it out, like, to this boy that she likes, and unconvincingly too, like, she just blurts it out and then says, "Oh, but that was supposed to be a secret, don't tell anybody, okay, thanks, bye." And I'm like, Of course he's gonna tell.
And at what point would he agree to that?
I know.
Like, it should have been him arguing with her, saying no. Like, you know what would make much more sense? She lets that slip, and then he convinces her to tell his parents.
Right.
That would make way more sense.
That would make way more sense.
Struggling with the idea that she was, like, kind of turning on her family in a way. She'd be struggling with that idea, but knowing that she was doing something for the greater good. It would cause the conflict that is going to happen anyways, but it would happen in a much more natural way than, like, this boy that's the son of, like, the leader of this colony basically going like, "Oh, so we're all going to die here and there's nothing, and sure, I'll just keep that a secret." You know, like, how preposterous that is. Like, it's just
preposterous. It's one of my pet peeves in, like, TV shows when characters keep secrets from others just for the sake of drama, for no good reason other than it'll create drama if they keep a secret and then it gets out. Right?
It's like, just fucking talk to each other.
Exactly. You know, I know when you're, like, trying to create fake drama instead of, like, letting drama happen organically through the story. And Lost in Space is, right now, it's just fake drama, like, even down to, like, the life and death things. Like, they literally drive into a tar pit. They just drive into it. And then they're like, "Whoops, we're in a tar pit. We're gonna die." And I'm like, you just drove into it. Like, why would you do that?
Plus, it took a while for it to start sinking, and then it just sunk, like, immediately when they needed it to be tense.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just kind of weird.
It was weird as hell, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want to get through this. I don't know if I have any interest in a season 2 on this. But we're going to get through it. We'll watch the last 3 episodes and talk about those.
We're committed to at this point.
We're committed to finishing it, but man, this show really disappointed me in ways I was not expecting. I was thinking more like there might be some budget limitations. Like, they obviously showed a pretty excessive budget, and that, like, at some point that would come back to bite them in the butt. That was more what I was worried about.
And so far, no, the budget seems to be pretty steady across the episodes.
We were both worried about the kind of survival aspects, that there would constantly be like, "Oh, here's another survival aspect." That ended up not being the worst thing.
Right.
The worst thing ended up just being stupid characters.
Yeah, stupid characters and drama for the sake of drama that is not happening because, organic.
I think the only character I like now is, like, Don West.
Yeah, I think so too.
And ironically, he seems like he's the smartest character of the bunch right now.
Yeah, ironically, yeah, because he's the one acting logically.
Yeah. He's like, "Wait, what are you super geniuses doing? You guys are fucking morons." Yeah. That's Lost in Space. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on to more interesting things.
Let's talk about Legion, Season 2, Episode 8, titled Chapter 16. Because once again, they just want to confuse the hell out of us, even with the titling of the episode. So.
Yeah, well, it's not confusing, right? Because it's the 16th episode of Legion.
Yeah.
So, if you're compartmentalizing into seasons, but they're just continuing on from the numbering from last year. So they're
that is true, but it's still, it creates confusion,
Yes. Part 16.
But anyways, so this episode of Legion did quite a few different things. One thing in particular that I really, really like whenever it's done well, and I think it was done exceptionally well here, is like when they're showing different characters or different points, or like trying to show a lot of travel in a scene, and they cut and they show scenes kind of sliding together as like almost a collage, And they did that on several occasions with David kind of walking through the desert.
Yeah.
And they did it exceptionally well. Like, it just looked really clean. It looked really organic. Like, one scene would cross over another one at just the right time for it to, it just was like expertly put together. It was like a joy to watch.
Oh yeah. I mean, Legion has always been a visual treat. I mean, yeah, they got that part down. They got everything down.
I enjoyed the whole race this episode. Like, it really did feel like a race.
Yes, this was a race. They were racing, Farouk and David were racing towards his body. They both received the information on its location. Mm-hmm. This episode, And the way like Farouk got the information, that was a touching scene. Apparently, apparently he was visiting, this lady was an old friend or something, and she was basically at the end of her life anyway. And she basically asked him, like, she'd give him the information in exchange for him killing her.
Basically putting her in like a never-ending dream.
Right, yeah. She called it the never-ending dream. I don't know if that was just a euphemism for death, but I think it was.
I think he basically took her mind and put it into a constant dream state, similar to the way he had Lenny in his mind, except instead of torturing Lenny, he's kind of just giving her her own little dream, you know?
That could get too. I just thought that was a touching scene, and that it does like reinforce that this idea that, you know, Farouk isn't total villain. He's not like this 100% evil entity.
Yeah,
you know?
he's not a monster. He's
not a monster. There is humanity there.
He's selfish.
Yeah, it's just he's selfish. Yeah,
he's selfish. Entitled. He's selfish and entitled, and
he's a bit an egomaniac because he has these abilities that ordinary people don't have, and that kind of
he thinks himself godly, you know.
Yeah, he thinks of himself as another class, right? Yeah, as God, you know. So,
but he also doesn't really necessarily feel all that threatened. He doesn't feel like he's not lashing out, you know.
Yeah, he's not lashing out. He's just conceited.
Yeah, he's not like swearing vengeance and stuff. That's not what he just wants to have the power he had before, you know, and he might end up doing really bad things with that power, but he's not like, oh, just you wait, you know?
Oh, just you wait. Exactly. He's not doing that. He just wants to have his body and his power back, and whatever he does with that, you know, who knows? But yeah, it was nice to have that reinforced that, you know, like, there is an element of humanity to him, so you got to see that through that scene, and I thought that was a really good scene, the episode.
Meanwhile, David got the same information on where Farouk's body is from Ptolemy, who was able to communicate through one of the robots. We're called Vermilion, by the way. That's what they're listed in the credits.
Okay, Vermilion.
He was told by Ptolemy was able to take control of one of the Vermilion, and
because his consciousness still exists in some sort of it. I don't even know.
It's in a computer mainframe that everything is hooked up. Like, we actually got kind of insight into that, like where the
so that was the mainframe. Yeah, we did get insight into where we got some backstory on the head honcho guy there, right? The guy with the mask over his head.
The mutant with the healing factor. Yeah. And because he has a healing factor, they were able to do some pretty crazy shit to his head, and he was able to survive it. So they could create like a locked cage for information.
Yeah, they're downloading like their thoughts and information into him because they're afraid that they were afraid that mutants could peek in or to see that information unless it was protected, and I guess they figure that they can't penetrate like another mutant. I wasn't quite sure how healing factor means that other mutants still can't read his mind, but
I don't think that was it. I think it was that they needed a mind that they could put the technology into, and that only a mutant with the healing factor could survive the process.
I got that part. Yeah. Like he could survive.
So it's not that because he's a mutant, he is immune. It's all the technology that's basically being put into him is making him immune.
Oh, right. And it's the technology that's protecting the information.
Yeah, but the technology can only be used on a mutant because he's got the healing factor to survive it being used on him. That's what I took away from it, anyways. We find out a bit about that. We're learning a little bit more about how the mainframe works and stuff. And Ptolemy ends up noticing he follows a trail inside the mainframe, like a wire that's moving, and finds it leads to the monk who had killed himself. And apparently the monk had hacked the mainframe at one point. Like he had hacked the other people's minds, you know, with his contagious behavior.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he left like a piece of himself in there. Yeah. And so even though the monk's dead and all his information's gone, well, now you have a piece of his information
that's because they had an earlier scene with David and his girlfriend, and I'm sorry I suck at remembering names.
Sid.
David and Sid, where, you know, Sid was asking David how they find Farouk's body, and David was lamenting that Monk was dead. And so after you have this with Ptolemy, where he sees a piece of Monk in the mainframe, and from that piece he learns the location of Farouk's body.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he gets the vision of where Farouk's body is. And that's how Tolmei ends up that information that he can give to David. So, like you said, he takes control of one of the Vermilion, and he goes to talk to David. I think David's reaction is like, "You're alive?" And then Tolmei says, if I exist, if you can consider that being alive,
Yeah, so that's kind of kicked off the race between David and Ptolemy. What I thought was really interesting is that, and we don't have a full insight into this yet, but David has realized that he can't just like go straight forward and just try to find it by himself in a race. But he also can't tell all these people in the base. He can't just like reveal all the information.
Here's the thing, he knows that he needs these people to help him, right? Because he knows he can't do it on his own. Mm-hmm. But he also can't tell them because Farouk is powerful, and he worries that if they have the information that he has, Farouk will be able to get the information from one of them and find out where his body is.
So he basically leaves like psychic mind bombs.
Yeah, psychic mind bombs that basically tell them what to do without actually consciously giving them the information, so they don't know until the mind bomb is activated, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So he's kind of like triggering them, and he plots out the strategic. I thought it was funny, like,
and the scene where he's plotting it out. Yeah, it's
like
so funny.
Thing of fruit.
he takes the thing of fruit. He like burns it to ash, and then he eats it. And
This is like weird childish exploration of anger.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. So one other thing we got that kind of made me look at some of my problems with this season that I kind of hadn't really put into words yet for myself, at least.
Okay, yeah, I want to hear what your problems with season was, because I don't think you've really brought this up yet.
But we saw, I hadn't really like got my thoughts organized in such a way until recently.
It's hard with this show, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult because you can't. It's hard to like wrap your head around a lot of times,
Sometimes you get so wrapped up in the puzzle that it's hard for you to realize like, okay, there's an aspect of this that I haven't been liking and I can't put my finger on what it is because I'm so preoccupied trying to solve this puzzle. And then
I was like kind of in the same boat. I was kind of feeling that too, like earlier today, because I was thinking, and I can't put my finger on why, but I was thinking,
I think it's the character.
I think this is weaker than season 1. I don't think this is as good as season 1, and I can't figure it out.
Character interactions.
Yeah.
But there aren't many. Like, there isn't much going on in character story.
That's true. You're right. There isn't. Yeah, I think that's it, because when you go back to season 1, it's a character profile, right? It's a profile of David and a deconstruction, and for all the crazy shit, it's intimately focused on him and his interactions with the other characters, and this is much less so.
This is like a chess game between Farouk and David.
Yeah.
And all the other characters kind of have fallen to the sidelines. And I think the thing that pointed this out to me happened in this episode. And that's because the leader of his previous group from season 1, Jean Smart's character, I can't think of her name.
Yeah.
She kind of like played a slightly more significant role in this episode. And it kind of made me think like, God, she's only had like, this is episode 8 of this season. She's only had like one significant moment in the entire season so far before this.
You know what? It's kind of embarrassing. When she first showed up in this episode, my first thought was, who's that? And then it took me a minute. I'm like, oh yeah, because she has not been a big or much of a presence at all.
And she's been there. She's just like been kind of like, they explained it at one point, like showing that she was just really distraught about her husband being on the run with Farouk and like how that's affected it. And she had the part where she was like talking to David and Sydney about like,
I guess like the big idea is like she's just been so distraught over her husband all season that she's been withdrawn and hasn't had much to do with the plot,
But that just kind of feels a little weak. Like it's just like they didn't have time for her.
Right.
And
or
so
maybe,
that any involvement from
or
her
maybe she didn't have time then. Maybe, they just couldn't get her for a big role in the season.
Yeah. But that pointed out to me that it wasn't just her. It's like other characters too. Like they brought up an interesting change of development for the Carries that you character's named Carrie.
Well, that's right. They haven't really explored.
They brought like a big thing, and they just haven't explored it at all.
Yeah,
it's like they brought it up, and they said, "Oh, this is interesting,ing," and then they just moved right on.
They're just they're just so focused on the chess game between David and Farouk. Like I said, like this switched over from being a character study to being something else entirely.
Yeah, and so that's I kind of noticed that when Jean Smart showed up in this episode, and it made me think like, God, she hasn't been in this much. When was she last there? And I'm like, well, she had that cool bit with that Zork-like moment with the
that was awesome.
Maze, But I'm like, she wasn't even really in that much. That was just like David in that Zork maze. That was her.
But you were right, because I was feeling some like undefined sense, like I was thinking like earlier, like the season isn't as good as season 1, but I can't quite put my finger on why. Like I can't figure it out. And then I think hearing you articulate it now, it comes forward for me more. I put the pieces together and say, oh, yep, that's it.
Yeah, it's just, they haven't had much good character interaction. And it's like Sydney's been like a big part of this season, but like she hasn't really challenged David much. I mean, she's kind of gotten angry at him a few times and challenged him in that way, but like their relationship really hasn't been interesting or challenging in any way like it was in the first season. Like they haven't really done much there either. Like she's kind of mainly been useful as part of the puzzle game is like, her philosophy on things connecting to David, and then the whole like struggle with the idea of a future Sydney getting involved in the conflict. Like that kind of stuff is why Sydney's been a big part of this season. But like as far as her relationship with David, there hasn't been much either. It's all been like for the sake of plot. And plot's great, and I love plot, and I love all the weirdness that's going on in Legion, but you gotta have character story too, because you gotta care about these characters that you're interacting with. And thinking back on it, like Ptolemy, like when he basically died, like that was I really liked him in season 1. And in season 2, he was just like a plot point. I didn't really feel invested in his character.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of it. It's like in like almost every character relationship, there's areas they could have gone. And oddly enough, what made this come up was the fact that they started paying attention to characters again in this episode. That's what pointed out the fact that they hadn't been for so long. Because like Ptolemy having kind of like that throwaway line where David's like, "Oh, you're still around." And he's like, "Well, if you can call this alive,
Yeah,
like
that was a great moment.
Like that kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's a more interesting moment for Ptolemy. It just goes by like quickly. But then also there's the part where Sydney's talking to the guy with the burned face, and they're having like a little like girl chat or something, about relationships. It's like that's interesting. I wanted to see more of that through the season, like not just the two of them, but just in general, like characters communicating in that kind of way. We just didn't, get much of it this season. And I don't think this isn't a condemnation of the series. Like, the series was juggling a lot this season.
It was, yeah. It's not a condemnation of the series. I mean, because the show's still great, in my opinion. I'm still enjoying it.
Definitely.
It is just a step back from like, oh my God, this is brilliant, from the first season.
Like, I've been hooked in all the kind of weirdness of it. I've been hooked in all of that. But I felt like a little bit colder towards it just because I'm less invested in the characters.
Right.
And I just think I think last week I might have mentioned that I thought it was getting a little bit dull because it was so location heavy, just almost location.
I think it could have been more interesting if they flipped it from the first season and kind of made this season like a character study of Farouk, where the first season was a character study of David. If they did like the same for Farouk, that could have been interesting.
Yeah, Farouk is probably the best part of this.
Yeah, Farouk is definitely the best part of this season. He's a great character.
But yeah, it's just kind of an interesting reaction I had. We should probably bring up that there was another John Hamm narrated sequence about delusion. This time it was referring to the idea of like not paying attention to the real world, basically.
Well, they talk about like narcissism, right? And they talk about the delusion. The delusion was like something about like the delusion that
other people don't matter.
Yeah, everything outside of yourself is not real. So like you're the only thing that's real, and everything else is not real. You're viewing
everybody else is just a character in your story.
They use like cell phones and the prolific of cell phones to make a point that you're viewing the world through a lens, and through this lens, reality is reflected back to you, but not always the way that it is. And through this lens, you start to not see people as real or anything as real. The only thing you know is real is you. And so you start becoming callous towards other people because of it.
The interesting thing here is I think this is the first one where we saw things like cell phones and stuff.
Right.
Which doesn't really matter because this whole explainer thing is like completely outside of the continuity.
Yeah, it's completely outside continuity. So it's not like...
this takes place in 2000 because that's an LG... Or this takes place in 2016 because that's an LG G4, you know? It's like, no, this is completely outside of continuity.
No,
so
these little vignettes are to illuminate a part of the plot, you know, that they're going to incorporate, you know. They illuminate some of the concepts that they're working with in the plot. Which is
interesting if you think about my complaint about the season so far that I just realized was that we don't have these character relationships, and the vignette that we had this week was other people don't matter, was the delusion.
So you know what? So maybe this is on purpose. maybe the showrunners know exactly what they're doing with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's why I like this episode so much but I think more than anything, I just liked it because this episode felt like a race. And I liked that aspect of it. I like the plotting on each side. I like that Farouk just isn't even really plotting that much. He's just kind of moving forward, but he's aware of where David is and stuff. And David is like setting like traps or setting pieces in his plan to get there, but he's still struggling. Like it's not like he's got it all figured out. He's struggling to get through. And that aspect and just like the way everything was put together, it really did feel like a race this episode.
Yeah.
Which is what this whole season's supposed to have been. But like it really felt like it in this episode. So, is there anything else in this episode that we really missed out on talking about?
Not really. I don't think. No, definitely not. We hit all the major points.
Then let's move on to our last discussion of the night, which is Westworld, Season 2, Episode 5, Akane no Mai, which there's a character named Akane, so that could mean...
Welcome to Shogun World.
Mai means dance, so Akane no Mai could mean Akane's dance, but Akane also means like red, so it could be like the red dance. I've heard that interpreted, but I think it's more like it's supposed to be the Japanese does a lot of like double meanings, so I think it's supposed to be Akane's dance is the red dance, kind of. Is what it means.
It kind of hints at a major plot point of this episode.
So we should say first off that
what an episode!
This is the Shogun World episode.
Yes, this is
where we get introduced to Shogun World. I have to say, like, I'm going to start with a complaint.
Start with a complaint. Go ahead. I have no complaints, by the way.
My complaint is that I think they should have made this whole episode in Shogun World. They shouldn't have cut back and forth between Dolores and Shogun World. I think it hurt the pacing.
Okay,
I think they had different vibes. Like Shogun World had a different vibe than the other scenes. So then when it would cut away from it and then cut back, it took a while to kind of get back into that vibe. And
I think, I agree with you. I do. Okay,
I think if they had saved that, if they had said, okay, so we're going to do just Shogun World this episode, and then next week we're going to do that Dolores stuff, and we're going to intercut that with what's happening with Bernard, which Bernard wasn't in this episode really. And if they said, okay, that's going to be next week, but this week is going to be just a full-on Shogun World episode.
Yeah, they do start the episode with Bernard in like, I don't know what to call it, the present, or is it the future? What is the present?
That's the present, as far as we know.
Okay, I don't know if that's actually.
It's the first scene we see in the first episode of the season.
You know why
that timeline.
You know why I'm confused as to whether that's the present or not is because we don't have a baseline for what is the present. Because last season ended with the robot revolution starting, and so you could argue that's the present, and then the stuff with Bernard is in the future, and then there's stuff in the past, or you can argue Bernard is. But we don't actually have a good anchor point for which point is the present.
I just like to think that the point that's furthest ahead is the present, and everything else is showing how we got there.
Yep, okay. I will accept that because, yes.
That's the way I kind of perceive it. As far as we know, unless they've tricked us with something, the stuff with Bernard and the Delos group that are going through Westworld and where this episode starts basically is the furthest ahead in the timeline of any of the other stories we've seen.
Yes, it is the furthest. You can definitely say that. That is the furthest ahead. So we start there. We get a little bit of exposition, you know. It's nothing too major happens in these scenes.
They put a little more focus to kind of let you know, yes, that was Teddy floating in the water.
Yes, that was Teddy.
Because you see him again. You see that they're not just like stumbling upon it and doing nothing. They're actually like basically draining that sea and recovering like everything, not just the bodies, but everything that's there to determine. We also find out in that scene that the host mines are like white or like virgin almost. Like they haven't even been used or something. That's basically what the text says. It's like, it's almost as if there was never.
Yeah, he said it's almost as if they were never activated.
Yeah. And so that's basically it for that scene. That's like everything we really got out of that scene.
Yeah, that's basically it. And then we move on to Dolores and Teddy. And basically these scenes aren't too interesting. Like they build up over the course of the episode to. It's
just showing that Dolores is just kind of an intolerable ass now.
Yeah, Dolores is an intolerable ass now. Right? Those scenes focus on Dolores and Teddy's relationship with like the Spectre being, what she saw, Teddy not following through with her orders to kill that guy. And you can guess where it's going. Like the ending isn't like a huge shock, like they try to play it off as like a surprise. But it's like classic Westworld of like, you already telegraphed what you were going to do. Come on. They try for a fake out and it doesn't work if you're savvy enough to pick up on where it's going.
What's interesting is I think Westworld in this season has basically 3 protagonists that we're cutting between.
Yes.
It's Dolores, Bernard, and Maeve. Those are like the 3 protagonists, and they're in 3 different areas, basically.
Yeah.
And we're seeing their different stories, and they occasionally cross over and meet each other, but it's cutting back and forth between these 3 stories. Bernard, of course, we're seeing in 2 different timelines of the story.
Yeah,
we haven't seen any of the other characters in the present timeline yet.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Because what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right.
I think they just don't want to play their cards yet and they want us to not think that these other characters are safe, basically. Right. So they can't do that. They can only show like one. But anyways, I think each of the characters kind of represents something. Like Bernard is like, or actually there's 4 characters, not 3. I'm sorry. I forgot about one. The Man in Black.
Oh, that's right.
Is the 4th one.
There's 4.
The Man in Black represents like adventure. He's the adventure story in Westworld. When you want to see something adventurous, it's the Man in Black story that you're following, He's like the great Wild West gunslinger going on an adventure. That's his story. Then you have Bernard's story is the puzzle. If you're into the kind of the mystery of like, oh, what's going on? What's happening here? That's Bernard's story. And then you have, Maeve's story, she's like the emotional heart she's the emotional story. She's like, okay, we're exploring the idea of, and it's interesting because they could have done this with Dolores too, but they really didn't. They just kind of made her an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she's kind of like okay, you have a robot that has free will. What does this mean on an emotional level? How is the emotional intelligence of this character affected? That's Maeve's story. And then, like I said, Dolores is just an asshole. She's like just becoming the antagonist, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah, she's just becoming an antagonist, right? She's insufferable. And really, yeah. So we have her part of the story, but the real interesting story, the meat and potatoes of the episode is Shogun World, and I think Maeve is a much more interesting protagonist than Dolores is, right? Because Dolores is
before we get there, because I want to focus on Westworld, or on Shogun World. So I just want to get out the last aspect of the other story, so we can just shift completely to Shogun World for the rest of the
if you want to do that, yeah, that's fine.
So basically we find out, just to kind of do it really quickly, that in Dolores' story in this episode, she's basically interacting with Teddy, and they're in Sweetwater, the town, the main town from like the first season that we haven't seen too terribly much this season.
Let's just cut to the chase with this. Like basically she spends the episode trying to figure out if she can still trust Teddy or not, and she basically concludes that she can't and that he needs to be reprogrammed or something.
Which ties into the fact that all these host minds were like virgin.
Yeah.
She basically reformatted him.
Yeah, she basically reformatted him.
Which is just kind of tragic and sad and just makes her just less and less relatable and interesting as a protagonest. And
because
more and more towards
she basically does it because she determines that Teddy isn't enough of an asshole. Yeah.
Like, you're a good person. You can't be a good person. That sucks.
Yeah, that's terrible. You gotta be an asshole. And so basically, that's why Maeve to me is more interesting protagonist, because there's more layers to Maeve, right? Maeve isn't just,
she's more human.
Yeah, she's more human. Maeve isn't talking about going out into the real world and conquering it like some supervillain, like she's Magneto.
Well, her original plan before she just decided she needed to get her daughter was to just live in the human world.
Yeah, she wanted to just
live, become part of it, and disappear into it.
She just wants to be free, right? But
yeah.
But now she wants to find her daughter because she doesn't want to do that without her daughter, obviously.
Yeah.
So if there's any chance that she can find her daughter and then just go live, be free with her daughter, that's what she wants to do.
And so that's Maeve's story that we're in now, which is Shogun World, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this discussion, because that's the actual best part of the episode. And it's like I said at the very beginning, I wish the whole episode had just been Shogun World and covered the exact same length of story, but went in more depth, because there were a few parts that felt a little rushed, and I think that was the only real problem with the Shogun World.
Because they kept like switching between Shogun World and Dolores' story, which was, Dolores stuff was much less interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been more interesting if it was paralleled with Bernard's story, which they showed in the present here.
Yeah, but it wasn't paralleled with Bernard's story. When really the Dolores stuff actually has connections to the Bernard stuff. It doesn't have any connection to what's going on in Shogun World. So it is kind of weird that they kept switching between Shogun World and Dolores.
The one connecting material is just that this episode saw Dolores back in Sweetwater, and we basically saw the Shogun World version of Sweetwater.
Yeah, well, we find out that Shogun World is a total copy of Westworld. Because which
is a meta joke.
Yeah, which is a meta joke, right?
Because if you're a fan of old samurai movies, I'm talking like Akira Kurosawa, like 1950s, 1960s samurai films and stuff, then you know that so many of like the big westerns of that time frame are just straight up ripoffs of samurai films.
Of samurai films.
The most notable one I always bring up is the Magnificent Seven.
Mm-hmm.
which came like I think 6 years after the Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
And it's basically a copy of the exact same thing. And then you have, ones that there are things like Rashomon that have been copied in the West for all sorts of things where it's just a trope now. It's like, how we talk about Groundhog's Day episodes. It's like a Rashomon trope, which has been copied. And so
I like, because
Magnificent Seven Samurai, that's the big one.
Because Maeve has the main writer for Westworld leading her, like following her around, like telling her where she's supposed to be going to find her daughter. You basically get this moment where Maeve is like, you plagiarized us, and he basically says, hey, you try writing 300 stories at the same time.
So basically where this really comes into fruition, and like I didn't like it at first until I realized what was happening, was that there's a scene as they're going through Sweetwater, or not Sweetwater, the Shogun World version of Sweetwater, which, a little behind the scenes thing, it was shot at the exact same place. They refabricated
that's cool.
Stretch of Sweetwater to look like Shogun World.
Oh, so they basically redid the set in that same location.
Yeah, and they had parts from Sweetwater in that same episode, which shows that they did it in a limited amount of time,
that's cool. That is some attention to detail.
Yeah, it's pretty amazingly done. Like I should also say, just a moment of pride for myself and my hometown, that's all filmed out near me.
Oh, so, really?
It's filmed about about a 10-minute drive from where I live.
Go visit the set sometime.
You can. They open up that when they're not filming, they open up that area for certain things. Like they have something called like the Cowboy Music Festival.
You should apply, see if you can get like on there as an extra.
They also do.
Just hit them up
there too.
Just hit them up and say, you need any extras for season 3?
Yeah.
I will be somebody in the background. I will be a dead body, like just lying there.
No, then I'd probably have to be naked. I'm not going to do that. This is Westworld after all.
True.
You're going to be naked and being dragged. He's like, no.
You're going to be dragged.
But it's the same set was also used in Deadwood. If that's probably why Sweetwater looks familiar to you.
Oh yeah, you're right.
It's also Deadwood.
It's Deadwood.
It's a real famous Western shooting location. But it's not like a real town. It's like it's a facade Western town designed for filming Westerns. And they film a ton of them there. But yeah, anyways, they go into Sweetwater. They're going through, you're basically seeing like all of the NPCs, like the quest giver NPCs, basically, that you'd see in Westworld. Like they're replaced with like different versions of them. You see like different aspects in the town.
It's a total copy. It's just it's just a different setting, you know.
It's a reskinned.
Yeah, it's a reskin. And like the writer says, he's like, well, you know, I have to write 300 stories. Like they all can't be original. I'm gonna copy paste, you know, it's a different park essentially. So, you know, he figures, you know, he can copy some stories between parks and people won't really notice.
Yeah.
You know?
And so the first real thing that kind of happens here, and like I said, I didn't like it at first, was you start to hear like this Japanese sounding cover of Paint It Black. And I didn't get it at first. I was just kind of like, I don't know if that's the right one to translate into a Japanese sounding song. Like, I don't know if that song works as well on that. And then I started to realize what they were doing. I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Well, you know what?
This is the same scene from season 1 of Westworld.
You know what? You know, it's pretty bad because, you know, when you start the episode and they show, you know, previously on and they show like all the scenes from previous episodes that are going to be relevant, they show.
Oh, I fast forwarded through that, so I just didn't know.
Yeah, they show that scene. And so like, so when I heard that music, I knew exactly what they were doing because I put it together because otherwise I was thinking, okay, yeah, but why are we referencing this? You know, this was before shit went down. I don't understand it. And then I'm like, oh, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. So when they started playing the song, at first I was like, yeah, I don't know if that was like a good song pick for this. I was so focused on just the song and like if I liked the Japanese version of the song that like it took me a while to realize, oh, wait a minute. They did this exact thing with the same song, but like in a Western version last season for this thing. And it just becomes more and more apparent as it goes on because it's exactly the same. They go on, you know, the samurai that captured them at the end of the, like 2 episodes ago, the last time we saw Maeve's character and stuff. They got captured by this. They're being brought through the city and they realize that this group is basically the same as Hector's group from Westworld. They're exact parallels. And so the samurai that's like in the lead, that's leading this group, he is Hector's doppelganger, basically. And, he's his Shogun World clone or, you know, whatever. Then you also see like, oh, there's this other character and like she pulls off her like this mask over her face and you see she's got like a dragon tattoo on her face, which is like how, Armistice has the snake tattoo on her face. And so it's like, oh, okay, so these characters are the same. And then you start realizing like, wow, like every character in this town is another version of a Westworld character. Many of them the same ones that we're seeing right now.
Right, exactly.
Like Hector, Maeve, Armistice, they're Shogun World versions of all of them.
And like the writer tries to explain to Maeve, he's like, you guys aren't even supposed to be meeting each other. You know, this was not intended to happen.
This could go very badly. And then you see Armistice and that her clone like just kind of like staring at each other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Just kind of like tilting their heads and staring at each other. Like playing like a mirror game or something. But yeah, and of course, like Hector just hates the samurai version of it.
Yeah, he just hates samurai.
Which is just like basically self-loathing, I guess you can say.
I guess so, yeah.
Great actors, I should say. All the Japanese actors in this are great. And they're actual Japanese actors. A lot of times when you have like, oh, here's a Japanese part or something like that, it's like one actor is like Filipino, another one's like Chinese, and none of them really speak Japanese well.
As long as people look Asian, right? And they actually kind of like call that out. They make fun of it, right? Because they do have that Asian guy in the cast as from last season, right? So he's with them and he's with his friend, and he's like, his friend is like, you translate? Aren't these your people? Can't you translate? And he's like, I'm from Hong Kong, asshole.
Yeah, they called that was really funny. But I really like all the actors involved in it. The guy that plays Hector's doppelganger, he was in Lost, if you remember. He was like in like the last season, I think, or was it the second to last season? He was in towards the end of Lost.
Was he in Lost? Okay, I don't recognize him from Lost.
He was the guy in charge of the temple when they went to the temple in Lost, you know?
Oh, okay. It's been like so long.
He kind of like killed Saeed and brought him back to life, remember?
It's impressive. It's been so long. I can't remember any minor characters. Like, he asked me. Like,
he wasn't in it for too long. He was like the leader of a group, but he like died pretty quickly.
Okay. I'm impressed that you remember that. But yes.
Well, I know the actor because the actor he's been in some samurai films too in Japan.
Oh, he has.
He did a movie called Twilight. I think it was called Twilight Samurai. That was like a throwback to like a Akira Kurosawa films, and he was like the lead of that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because he looks a lot like there's one of Kurosawa's leads, and it's not the main guy that was in like every Kurosawa film. It's another one of the ones who was in Seven Samurai. samurai and stuff. He was an older actor. This guy could be like his younger doppelganger. Like he looks so much like him. It's crazy. And he's really good at playing that type of role. You know, he's really good at playing like the samurai role. He gets the right amount of bravado, the right amount of confidence, that right amount of like, ego and stuff. It's all there. He's really good at that type of role. So I really like him. The actresses who played the geisha girls were really good as well. Just everybody was very authentic. And I think that's the main point I want to bring out is that like, I've seen a lot of samurai films and stuff, and there's like a smoldering emotion behind these characters where they don't like necessarily say what they're feeling, and they kind of like, it's like you can see it kind of fighting behind their eyes, and that's here, like in spades. Like they really nailed it, that tone. Except that ninja scene.
Yeah.
That ninja scene, and I think maybe it just wasn't necessary at all. Like they could have cut that whole scene out. I think it would have probably been better.
I don't know. It was cool though.
And it was a cool action scene, but it kind of like,
I like the ninja scene. Keep it.
I don't know. I didn't like the way it's set up.
See. And also Maeve learned a new power from that scene. So
that's
it had importance.
I think, you know, like when I say like you could have cut it out and it would have been fine, is that I actually really wanted the scene to be longer. I wanted the build up to that scene before it happened to be longer. I wanted more reason for that scene to be in there. And that all comes down to what I was saying at the very beginning when we talked about this episode, is that I wish this was all Shogun World, this whole episode. I wish they could have really taken more time for us to get to know the characters in Shogun World and kind of like what Shogun World is. Because basically they had cut away from like a scene like where we found out that this was the exact same bank heist story, or that heist story that Hector's group was in from Westworld, but like in Shogun World. They showed that scene, then they cut away from that and went to a Dolores story, and then they cut back and it's just Maeve sitting there like smoking or something, and then the ninjas start attacking. Yeah. And it just feels like they could have set that up better. You know, they could have
maybe. I agree it was jarring, but I think it was supposed to be it was supposed to be a surprise.
I think the attack is a surprise is good. I don't know. There's something in there that's lost that just made that feel, I don't know, kind of wasteful. It actually, more than a samurai film, it reminded me of The Last Samurai, the Tom Cruise film. Oh. Because there's a scene just like that in that movie.
I did not feel the disconnect. I think part of what made this episode work so well is Maeve. You know, what made this episode work so well is Maeve. Like her interactions, like, because like there's so many good scenes with her. Like there's one scene where the writer is like, okay, well, you know, we're like, okay, things have really gone off the rails, and our chances of survival are fuck all. So if we just like run the fuck away, just ditch everybody, you know, we might make it. And Maeve is like, no, I'm gonna save what's her name? Asuka, something like that.
I think it was Sakura.
Was it Sakura?
It's a common girl's name that refers to the flower petals of a cherry blossom tree.
It was the girl that was kidnapped, basically.
Yeah, right? I believe it was Sakura.
Right. And he's arguing with Maeve, and he's like, okay, no, you're designed to be selfish. You're coded to be selfish. Like, you're just code. And then she's like, have you been paying attention? Like, I'm more than code at this point. Like,
yeah,
you even get it. And he's like, no, you're code, you know? And she's like, and Maeve even points out, it's like, yes, I'm programmed to be selfish, but yeah, I want to help this girl. And it's completely contrary to my design. So clearly more is going on here. So you don't get it. And, yeah. And that was like a really good scene, I thought.
I like all of her interactions with him. I like his story of like, kind of like having moments where he's kind of treating them more like actual people. And then like when he gets to a point where he needs to like think logically, he starts to go against that.
Right.
He's like, starts treating them like normal people. And then he's like, oh, wait a minute. You guys aren't people. You're just code and you're just machines.
Yeah, you're just machines.
And then he starts falling back into kind of thinking of them as normal people. And then like that logic kicks in again, and he's struggling with that. So I think that storyline's interesting. So this ninja attack happens.
You're hung up on this ninja attack.
Well, at the end of it, as you mentioned with Maeve's power, Maeve is trying, like, she's being attacked, and while she's being attacked, she's trying to talk to one of the ninja hosts.
Right. She can give voice commands to hosts, you know.
But she can't do it with this one. Because he's constantly like covering her mouth or grabbing her throat, or
he's choking her, covering her mouth, preventing her from speaking, basically. So she can't, and eventually gets to a point where he's going to kill her, full stop, right?
She's strangling her.
She can't get out of that situation. And then all of a sudden she like mentally connects, or, something happens where she's able to mentally connect to him and issue commands, non-verbally.
I heard some people complaining about this because they said it was like, oh, all of a sudden now she's psychic or something. And it's like, no, they actually addressed this beforehand. They addressed this when Bernard and God, what's her name? What's the name of the girl that he was with in the recent
Elsie? I think Elsie is her name?
No, not Elsie. The other before that.
Oh.
Charlotte.
Charlotte, okay.
When Elsie and Charlotte were looking for Dolores' father, the way they ended up finding him was by using basically like a find my iPhone way, by using one host to connect to another host. And that's how they found his location. They hacked one host and then used that host to like ping the host they were looking for, and that's how they found him. So they already established that the hosts have a way of communicating to each other like wirelessly. That they have a way of locating and connecting to each other in that way. And this is just basically Maeve's upgrade of her like, verbal hacking ability has like advanced now to the point that she can do it without actually saying anything. She can just kind of transmit the information she needs to transmit. So this is her new superpower. It all makes sense, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it makes sense. This isn't like a total asshole.
Yeah. But yeah, so, because this becomes an important part for the rest of the episode, because in that attack, Sakura is taken away. This is Sakura as Akane's like daughter figure, not really her daughter, I don't think, but like a daughter figure to her.
Yeah, she's a daughter, but not literally her daughter, but a daughter figure,
And the Shogun has taken...
And Maeve, I think Maeve, when she's having that conversation with Ryder, Maeve says, she feels the need to help Sakura, and she claims that's a selfless act completely against her programming, but then you look back at it and you think,
Sakura or
no, the other one. Akane. Akane is the Shogun World counterpart to Maeve, right? She's her direct counterpart, and like Sakura is like her daughter. And so I really think
kind of, because she's also kind of a little bit like what's the prostitute?
No, I know.
What's with Dolores?
But the point I'm trying to think, this is a daughter figure to Akane. Yes. This is a parallel and you could say like Maeve sees herself in Akane, and she sees her daughter in Sakura, and I think that's what's driving Maeve here more than anything, more than any kind of real altruism, is that,
So they're gonna like go after the Shogun with their group. They come up with a plan, basically because they from the storyline host, they killed this Chinese diplomat or something that was going to be bringing like a treasure to the Shogun, and Hector's counterpart, like that's what he was stealing from the safe, like in his storyline. So they have that, and so they basically set this plot where they're going to like pretend that a character is this representative of Chinese, so they can talk to the Shogun and get into his camp, and then they're going to like try to get the daughter back, who's going to be dancing for him.
But it doesn't work. Doesn't quite work.
Doesn't work partially because Akane can't keep her mouth shut. She can't keep from showing emotion when she sees her daughter basically being abused, her daughter figure being abused, and because of that, she ends up standing out to the Shogun, who, by the way, we find out is broken. He's leaking. He's leaking fluid like Bernard was.
Yeah, he's broken, and that is causing him to act erratically.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So they'd been through this whole thing. They'd been like, wait a minute, this isn't going according to script. Why is this happening? Is he become aware? Like how, Maeve and Dolores said? And it's like, no, he hasn't really become aware. He's broken.
Yeah, he's just broken.
So he recognizes, Akane mentions that like seeing her dance was like the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, and says she can have her daughter back if she dances for him that night.
Yeah.
And so they're there until night, and they get there, and Akane gets dressed up in her dancing costume, and her daughter's there, and the Shogun quickly kills her daughter in front of her. And then it's like, well, and now dance for me.
Yeah. This was a huge moment. It was like, holy shit, right? And it just gets better from that point, because Akane dances, and she dances for him and finishes it off with a spectacular ending, right?
She cuts his head in half.
It's brutal.
She basically saws it in half with like
a saws it in half. It's one of the most brutal deaths I've ever seen on a TV show before. Ever. That tops everything.
Less like a Japanese samurai film. That more felt like a Japanese like horror film, because
more like
there's a Japanese horror director named Takashi Miike, and that felt like straight out of a Takashi Miike film.
Yeah, and I have not watched his films, and I don't really feel like watching a movie that is full of stuff like that. So
he's a very gory director, but anyway, he cuts his head in half. They had a great moment where he stood up and like a few steps and fell over. Basically kind of like Gus Fring in Breaking Bad. It's the final hurrah and then as he's dying kind of moment. This causes then the samurai that are there are just like, well, fuck this, kill them all, and so this big attack starts happening. Through this, Maeve can't influence these samurai in her usual way because the emperor, or the shogun, upon hearing that they had a witch.
Oh yeah,
the ninja attack.
He burned off everybody's ears.
Yeah. So they couldn't be influenced by it. And being forced in this situation, she ends up finally being able to fully call upon this ability. And that's basically how the episode ends. Yeah,
that's
she got all the samurai to turn on each other, and then
it like literally ends right there.
By the way, Maeve is rocking that kimono.
Rocking that kimono.
That actress looks great, and she looked badass with her hair up, holding that sword, and the kimono just looked awesome. I bet you she's got like that picture framed and on her fridge or something, hanging on her wall, because that's just such an awesome picture. But so we're gonna have some more Shogun World, at least some, because Maeve is basically now like all the samurai are running towards her, but all his forces, but now she's got her weapon fully kind of figured out. That's mostly it for what's going on there. It's just the Shogun World stuff was great. I just wish that was it. I wish that was the focus, and that they could have really spelled it out and taken their time to develop certain aspects.
Yeah, I don't think Dolores stuff could have been left for like next episode,
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could say there's a parallel between Dolores and Maeve because they're both sentient, they both came to awareness, right. And that you have Maeve who's doing something altruistic because she wants to save her own daughter and because she sees the connection there. And then you have Dolores basically like killing the one person that's close to her. Yeah,
you have Dolores,
So there is a parallel there. It just didn't work.
Although I think Maeve is light years ahead of Dolores, as far as being aware and stuff, because Maeve is so fully aware that she's basically human at this point. Dolores isn't really behaving like a human being, right? She's not thinking like a human being. She's like she's gonna take over the world or some shit. Like,
she's like in her rebellious teenage phase.
Yeah. Maeve comes across as more fully realized.
Yeah. But that's where we are right now, in the story with Westworld. It's good. I want to see some more of Shogun World. We're supposed to get some more of it. I think next episode is probably not going to have any of it. That's basically,
because again, we have 4 protagonists, right? And this episode focused on 2, Dolores and Maeve.
So next one will probably be Bernard and Man in Black.
Yeah, it seems to switch.
Good. Those are Dolores' storyline. I think is the only one I'm not liking.
Yeah, it seems to switch off between like those 2 every other episode. Seems to be the rhythm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although that's going to be the rhythm until their paths start to more closely cross, which I think they will eventually.
Yeah, eventually. But yeah, that's Westworld. So really dug Shogun World, really dug what they were able to do aesthetically to make that look like Japan.
Yes.
To make Where I Live look like Japan. Pretty impressive.
I love that episode. That was great. Yeah, Shogun World was awesome. That was like everything they hyped it up to be. So loved it.
That was really cool. But yeah, so we'll be talking about more of that next week, along with the other 2 shows. Until then, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. Friday, May 25th, 2018, which is when this podcast will be available. Picnic at Hanging Rock comes to Amazon. I had mentioned it before that it's based on a mystery book from 1967. It's about schoolgirls who mysteriously disappear at Hanging Rock when they're at a picnic. It's in Australia. It's Natalie Dormer is the kind of the main lead in this. She was Marjorie Tyrell in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Troll Hunters is back on Netflix as well, and Quantico is back on ABC, finishing off its last season. Then on Sunday, May 27th, 2018, The Break with Michelle Wolf comes to Netflix. So this is another, Netflix has been doing a few now where they have like these weekly shows, or like, not dumped all in a season. Like they have the Joel McHale show, and then they have that David Letterman one that's like every month. Mm-hmm. And this is like another one. This is going to be kind of like their version of the Daily Show, I believe. That's going to cover kind of news of the week.
Okay.
Also, The Fourth Estate starts up on Showtime. The Fourth Estate being, if you know what the Fourth Estate is, it's the press. So it's like, I think it's like a documentary series about the press. Then on Monday, May 28th, 2018, 6 returns to history. That's about SEAL Team 6. Then on Tuesday, May 29th, 2018, 100 Code comes to WGN. This is a new series. It's got Dominic Monaghan from Lost, he played Charlie.
Nice to see Lost alums still getting work.
And the late Michael Nyqvist, I think is his name. And it's about a New York detective who heads to Stockholm to assist in the investigation into a serial killer.
Okay.
So that's the description. That's coming to WGN. So I guess they still have shows, but they're like, they're importing them now instead of making them. Queen Sugar is back on the Oprah Winfrey Network, Animal Kingdom back on TNT, and Arrested Development Season 5 on Netflix.
Yep.
Then on Wednesday, May 30th, 2018, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt back on Netflix. This is half of its season. So not the whole season, just the first half of it. That's another thing Netflix has been doing recently. They're doing some split seasons. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is one of those.
That's weird. Okay.
Reverie is coming to NBC. It's about a hostage negotiator, has a personal tragedy, gets a new job, whatever. Probably just boring procedural.
I'm already falling asleep.
And Dallas and Robo comes to YouTube Red. This is an animated series with John Cena playing the voice of the Robo. So another YouTube Red show. Friday, June 1st, 2018, CB Strike comes to Cinemax. This is a detective novel that was written by Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, but under a pen name.
Oh, okay.
She wrote it under a male pen name, and so this is an adaptation of that. CB Strike, Cinemax. So that's it for the week. Next week, we're going to continue our discussion of Legion. We're going to talk about the last 3 episodes of Lost in Space, and of course, more Westworld. Until then, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. Check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. That might actually link might not be working right now. I've been trying to fix our domain. We have a domain issue right now. So if you can't find that right away, you can also just check totalscreen.blogspot.com, which is kind of what that link will eventually be linking to once I get that all sorted out. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel, as well as other content from the past back when we were at TV Enthusiast. You can see all that stuff there as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Talk to you later.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best.